Pacific is often referred to as being on the front line of climate change due to the extreme vulnerability of many of the Pacific nations. In fact, the vulnerability of many Pacific countries is very different and dependent on their geography, their cultural practice, traditional livelihoods, their level of development. And though these countries experience very different challenges, one challenge has been quite prevalent across the board, and that's the changing impact on internal migration and external migration. For instance, in Suva, after the cyclone Winston, and due to increasing amounts of development, there has been an entirely new level of urban drift, which has drastically changed the profile of the country and put more pressure on urban centers. In Tarawa, in Kiribati, the situation is even more intensified by the fact that about 55% of the population has migrated to a singular atoll, putting a huge amount of environmental and pressure onto the limited carrying capacity of this atoll. Increasing risk of devastating sea surges, sea level rise, erosion are the obvious types of issues that we know Kiribati for, but in reality, many of the issues stem from an increasing amount of people living in one place, and the shorter term dire impacts come from levels of human pollution in the lagoons, the effect on having as many people as there are, putting pressure on limited arable land, on the freshwater resources. And it's very important now that policymakers and donors together identify the priorities that will make up the roadmap for deciding the best way to increase resilience in Tarawa and in Kiribati, looking at the way that livelihoods have changed and how lesser availability of sustainable subsistence livelihoods and less abundant reefs have affected traditional practice, and what that means for increasing urban drift and dependency on imported goods and on rainwater harvesting rather than natural wells for water. And also it's about communities managing those resources and making informed decisions about the way that they utilize the assets that they have. But also it's about all three of those actors, the donors, the policymakers, and the communities, realizing that part of the options and part of the resilience of the country may come from such drastic things as migration, and that migration itself can be, in some extreme circumstances, the best form of adaptation.